ecological economics, which includes David Badker, of course, who I've worked with for more than 10 years, I think, alongside, and has really taught me the importance and always reminded me to be on track on impact on the ground as a mantra. Also, I was first introduced to ecological economics by Dr. Sigrid Stagel at University of Leeds in the UK, although she is based in Austria. And I did my PhD with Dr. Jean-Pierre Javeret in Montreal, Canada. So yeah, I'll say a few words about the importance of achieving real impact on the ground, which is a very motivating and the reason why I am an ecological economist. I think it's important to take these moments to congratulate our achievements and use them as motivation to continue working hard and maintain hope in spite of the many problems we see kind of unfolding today on so many fronts, which can seem like real big obstacles. And sometimes it's hard to see kind of the progress be almost too slow, but I think we have to maintain kind of that determination and that hope to continue working. And I also think it's easier to find common ground than what we might think. So I think this is a really productive place to focus on. I think one of the biggest obstacles we have is polarization in our societies, in various groups, and that can be kind of very damaging as we alienate ourselves and others. And it makes it even harder to do our work, to protect our common goods and to achieve our common goals of ecological economics kind of establishes. And I'll say maybe a few words about some of the projects where I've seen real impact on the ground, and the fact that many times it comes from kind of unusual suspects. So you've named some, and I'll add a couple of others. I'll kind of bring up our work in Louisiana as well, learning from nature how deltas naturally work and replicating nature's systems to build and restore wetlands in Louisiana. So Louisiana is one of the most conservative and Republican states in the country, but a place where we have seen one of the biggest restoration projects be implemented, getting traditional conservative fishermen on board with us, kind of finding that common language and goals together. We're working right now with the New York Stock Exchange to create funds at scale for restoration. So these are non-traditional partners that are on board and see the urgency and the need of adopting these new worldviews. And I think we have to maintain that open mind to work together and find solutions. Right now I'm in Wyoming. I'm not in my office, and kind of maybe I seem not in my optimal. Dave was advising me to have more light so I don't look so suspicious. I'm in Wyoming, one of I think the most Republican state in the country, where I think 98% voters are Republican. And I've been spending a lot of time talking to people, to ranchers, to hunters, to really trying to understand how they stand on conservation. I see a big distrust of institutions and governments, and that is concerning on many levels, as it's a trend we're observing everywhere, not only in the United States, but elsewhere. But I also see a twinkle in their eye when we talk about wildlife habitat, when we talk about protecting forests, when we talk about rivers. So I know there is the potential there to work together, maybe in non-traditional ways, in new solutions. We really have to be innovative. The times today call for that type of thinking. But I think is the only way we can implement kind of the change that is needed today. So I'm gonna focus on trying to find that common ground. I think we all play a role. I'm very grateful for academia for giving me the journal articles and validating the data that I'm able to use when working with policy makers and other decision makers. So thank you for all your published work. I'm very grateful to activists that keep us in line, remind us of things that are non-negotiable and are really an energizing voice for what we stand for. Also for colleagues in other fields who I work with, sometimes we speak very different languages, but together as we open our minds and understand one another, we are able to create these systemic transdisciplinary solutions, which is really the vision and the worldview of ecological economics as I understand it. And I very much think is the way of the future of economics. And I hope we use these opportunities to grow, to energize ourselves, and to really kind of take over the field of economics overall. So thank you very much. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you, Tania. It's wonderful. And I see congratulations for you in the chat as well. Yes, thank you. And you all can go on our website to see, we will shortly put Tania on the list of past Daly Award winners, which is now up there in our website revamp. Okay, well, the board convinced me that as USSEE president, I should say a few words, as is traditional at this time. And it's funny because Tania and I didn't coordinate, but I think we were somehow on the same wavelength, because as I sat down to write my remarks, I had two guidelines in mind. First, to keep it brief, because I think we're all tired of seeing talking heads in boxes after 2 years. But second, to focus on stories of hope. And that's a common theme following on what Tania just mentioned. And so to be clear with a definition of what I mean by hope, I don't at all mean a kind of Pollyanna-ish belief that no matter what, everything is going to be fine. I'm using environmental scholar and poet David Orr's definition, which I love, which is hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. And the reason why I wanted to focus on hope is that, to put it very mildly, it's been a rough 2 years, right? It's been a rough 2 years for humankind, for the planet, for democracy, for equality, all of the priorities that we as ecological economists espouse. And I've been noticing that as these challenges keep rolling in and kind of hitting us over and over, many of us, myself included, have been succumbing to burnout and cynicism and feelings of despair, feelings of exhaustion. And I see this exemplified, of course, on social media. Last year, last August, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report in 2021 that was kind of a preview of the full 6th assessment report, which is going to be the state of the science on climate change, which will be released this year. But as the science was compiled and the report was drafted, the lead working group scientists didn't want to wait because they thought that waiting even one more year to issue an urgent warning was uncalled for. So they wanted to call a code red for humanity, and they released this kind of preliminary report. And the day the report was released, news media and the Twitter sphere were abuzz with the main talking points. And I also weighed in as someone who works on climate, and I said, as a scientist who has worked on climate for the past 23 years, these are the two things I want everyone to take away from the ICC report 2021. Number one, we are in a global crisis mode and we must demand our leaders act accordingly. And number two, it is not too late. Don't give up. The last sentence was in all caps, but I will refrain from shouting it at you here for emphasis. So this particular tweet went viral, as a few of my tweets over the years have, in that it got thousands of responses and retweets. And it was a curious thing happened. Over the course of my career, I've been accustomed to climate deniers kind of coming after me. I've been called a liar. I've been called someone who wants to get rich by scamming the government into giving me more money to study climate change. That was leveled at me when I was a postdoc, making very little money compared to what oil lobbyists make. So that was kind of funny. But this time I didn't see the deniers so much. This time I got dozens of responses that were arguing with my second point and stating that no, it is in fact too late to do anything about climate change. The problem is too big and humanity is doomed. Although, as you can imagine, this being Twitter, the words were a bit more choice than doomed. So as I read the responses to my tweet, I marveled that somehow we as a society have moved directly from not acknowledging the magnitude of the problems we face to now arguing that those problems are so big that they're unfixable. And believe me, I get it. I have those days when confronted with the destruction that we've wrought on the planet and on our fellow humans. I sometimes have days when it seems too much. But again, I want to emphasize that it is not too late. And our efforts as ecological economists, as activists, and as concerned humans are not in vain. And the problem with believing that there's nothing we can do is that it is functionally the same as believing that there's no problem at all, because both lead to inaction. And the good news is that we ecological economists have, from the very foundation of our society, been all about both identifying the problem and providing practical on-the-ground solutions, as Tania mentioned. One of my favorite quotes that I keep returning to in these times is by Donella Meadows, whose work on systems change and global limits have heavily influenced the direction of our field, of course. And she said, there is too much bad news to justify complacency, and there is too much good news to justify despair. So my fellow ecological economists, I wanted to talk about some of that good news in addition to some of the stuff we've been hearing about in the conference. This spring, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy released a memo that clearly draws from core principles of ecological economics, directing federal agencies to, quote, find solutions in nature, and to, quote, give a full picture of the state of nature and how it matters to our lives as they make decisions. Some of our own USSCE members are going to be involved in implementing these principles at the federal level. In 2021, wind and solar power generated 10% of global electricity use, an historic high. It's still not where we need it to be, for sure, but it is more than double the amount laid out in the 2015 Paris Accords. Where I work in West Africa, it's common to see small-scale solar cropping up in villages that were not historically electrified. Many parts of sub-Saharan Africa are poised to leapfrog over the fossil fuel era and develop using clean energy. And even mainstream, very traditional economists and development experts are now championing this because it's cheaper than building big coal plants and associated infrastructure. In Queensland, Australia, 4.5 million hectares of land, about the size of Massachusetts and New Jersey combined, have been transferred to the management of Aboriginal people. And not only are these areas some of the most biodiverse in Australia, but they also serve to protect the Great Barrier Reef, as they contain 2 watersheds that flow into the Great Barrier Reef Lagoon. Here at our own conference, we've seen presentations on real-world practical solutions for conservation, for food sovereignty, for clean energy security, for storing carbon and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and for education. And we have solutions. I think in the membership meeting yesterday, somebody said, I think it was Dr. Bott said, we have the solutions to these problems. This is what's going to solve our, the crises we're facing in the 21st century. Now, you may say, that each of these efforts on their own are not nearly enough to really turn the global tide. And that's true, but each of these things add up when they're combined with hundreds and thousands of other efforts. And you can look at the other faces on this Zoom and the faces that are not here in the room right now, and think about all of your fellow ecological economists and all of those who share similar values around the world, who are working in their own corners of their world, doing the scholarship, doing the activism, doing the policy making to make things just a little bit better. And that's not nothing. In fact, that's everything. So we're a small society in terms of membership and resources. And I think it's easy to feel as if, we're the David versus the Goliath and we need to be bigger to have impact. And to be sure, we're always looking to bring others into our community and to share our amazing intellectual resources with the rest of the world and to, convert more economists to our way of thinking. But I think we can also recognize that our ideas and our scholarship have expanded well beyond our modest boundaries. To the extent that they've influenced federal policy and global communities, really. And USSCE has always been at the vanguard of championing a good life for all humans, characterized by justice and sustainability, while respecting the limits of the biosphere. That vision has both challenged and encouraged me for 20 years. And as president, I'm committed to serving the societies that it will continue to do the same for all of you and all of the members. This year, we dedicated a lot of our resources to putting on a virtual conference and distributing other virtual content for people to engage with during the pandemic, because that's what our membership kind of said that they wanted. In the coming year, I'd like to focus on highlighting the amazing work that our members are doing, including all of you, in your scholarship, your outreach, your activism, and your communities. So please do get in touch with us when you, conclude an amazing project, when you have a win. Email us, get in touch with us by social media, at me on Twitter. We want to use these stories to encourage and engage others and to bring more folks into our discussion about solutions, because I think that's what people are really, really looking for these days. They're looking for stories of hope. And so I will just wrap this up by saying that when I lived in the Philippines, activists there used to greet each other with dugang kadasig, which means more power, which I love. So those are the words I will leave all of you with. Dugang kadasig, more power, and let's keep rolling up our sleeves. Thank you very much for coming.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And congratulations once again to Tania. And so at 4 o'clock Eastern time, the student poster and presentation session will start. So definitely, take a break if you need to, get a snack, and then come back for that. Good to see you all.
Thanks a lot.